My son refused to visit me at the hospital, so I cut him out of my will. Subscribe to see more stories like mine, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The Christmas tree lights cast colorful shadows across my living room as I placed the final touches on a dinner that would grow cold. I checked my watch again, 3 hours late now. My son Richard had promised he'd bring my grandchildren to visit. I'd spent 2 days preparing, baking Emma's favorite cookies and wrapping Lucas's new baseball glove. I smoothed the tablecloth one more time when my phone finally rang. "Mom?" It wasn't Richard. It was Jennifer, my daughter-in-law. "I'm so sorry, but we can't make it today." I gripped the phone tighter. "Is everything all right?" Richard got called into an emergency meeting. You know how it is with these end-of-year deals. I did know. I'd heard this excuse countless times. "Of course, dear. I understand. We'll come next weekend, I promise. The kids are so disappointed." I glanced at the perfectly wrapped presents under the tree. "Tell them Grandma understands. Work comes first." After hanging up, I stood motionless in my silent house. The 5-place settings I'd arranged that morning now seemed to mock me. I'd used my best china, the set my mother had given me on my wedding day. The turkey was perfectly golden, the cranberry sauce made from scratch. I sat down at the empty table and felt something crack inside me. Not fully break, but splinter. This was the 3rd canceled visit this month. I picked up my fork and ate alone. The grandfather clocks ticking my only company in the 4-bedroom house that had once bustled with family. Later, I carefully packed away the decorations I'd hung for the grandchildren. I wrapped the presents in tissue paper and returned them to my closet. I'd give them next time. There would be a next time. There always was, eventually. That night, I looked through old photo albums. In every recent picture, I noticed the same pattern. My eyes fixed on Richard with unconcealed adoration, his gaze always elsewhere. When had this started? When had my son stopped seeing me? I remembered holding his tiny hand on his first day of kindergarten, how he'd clutched my fingers when the teacher called the children inside, how he'd turned at the doorway, tears threatening to spill, before bravely stepping forward. I'd been his world then. Now I was just an obligation, a check mark on his to-do list, constantly rescheduled. The photographs blurred as tears filled my eyes. Outside, snow began to fall, covering Haverhill in a silent white blanket. I thought about calling Eleanor, my neighbor and only real friend these days, but it was too late. Instead, I poured myself a small glass of sherry, another Christmas tradition, once shared with my late husband George. I raised the glass to his photograph on the mantel. 10 years without you now," I whispered. "He's changed, George. Or maybe I never saw him clearly." The house creaked and settled around me, too big for one person, but filled with memories I couldn't bear to leave. My retirement from teaching had left a void that volunteering at the Children's Foundation only partially filled. I'd given Richard everything: financial help for his house, regular use of our Cape Cod beach apartment, even the vintage Mustang his father had lovingly restored. What had I kept for myself? My phone lit up with a text message. "Richard, Mom, can you leave the beach house keys with your neighbor? Need them for a client retreat next week?" No apology, no mention of today's canceled visit, just another request. My hand trembled as I set down my glass, wondering when exactly I had become nothing more than what I could provide. "Martha, you've got to stop dropping everything for that boy," Eleanor said, stirring her coffee at our weekly breakfast. Her silver hair was styled in a practical bob, her eyes sharp behind red-framed glasses. "He's 42, for heaven's sake." I watched the steam rise from my untouched cup. "He's busy building his career. That's important. More important than visiting his mother. When was the last time he came here without wanting something?" The question hung in the air. I couldn't answer. Eleanor reached across the table and placed her warm hand over mine. "I've known you for 15 years. I've watched you rearrange your life around his schedule, only to be disappointed time and again." "He's my only child," I said softly. "And you're his only mother. That should count for something." After breakfast, I drove to the community center where I volunteered teaching art to children with disabilities. The joy on their faces as they created something beautiful was my weekly salvation. Their parents called me a godsend, never knowing how much I needed this connection. That afternoon, my phone rang while I was helping 7-year-old Lily paint a butterfly. Richard's name flashed on the screen. I excused myself, heart quickening with hope. "Mom, I need a favor." His voice was rushed, distracted. Can you loan me the beach apartment next weekend? Jennifer's parents are in town, and I want to impress them. No, how are you? No mention of the canceled Christmas visit. I had plans to go there myself, I lied, testing the waters. It was the first time I'd ever denied one of his requests. Oh, his surprise was audible. What plans? Just some quiet time by the ocean. Another lie. The apartment had become his second home while I hadn't visited in over a year. Can't you reschedule? This is really important. Her father's considering me for a position in his company. I closed my eyes, already feeling my resolve weakening. Of course, Richard. I'll have it cleaned before you arrive. Great. Leave the keys with your secretary. Gotta run. I'm heading into a meeting. The line went dead before I could respond. I returned to Lily, who had finished her butterfly without me. It's beautiful, I said, admiring the chaotic splashes of color that somehow formed perfect wings. It's for you. Miss Martha, she said, beaming. Mom says you're like our guardian angel. I accepted the still wet painting, wondering why I could matter so much to these children while remaining invisible to my own son. That evening, I called my beach house cleaning service, arranged for fresh groceries to be delivered, and even ordered new bedding for the master suite, where Richard and Jennifer would stay. I spent an hour writing down instructions for using the boat, the best restaurants in the area, and the hidden beach access point that tourists never found. When I finally crawled into bed, exhausted, I checked my phone one last time. No thank you from Richard. Instead, there was a text with additional requests. Could I make sure the wine cooler was stocked? And did I still have that set of golf clubs that Jennifer's father might enjoy? I set the phone down without replying, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, I would drive the 2 hours to Cape Cod, stock the wine cooler, retrieve the golf clubs from storage, and leave everything perfect for my son, who couldn't spare 5 minutes to ask how I was doing. The realization hit me with unexpected force. I had become a resource, not a mother. A means to an end. Sleep eluded me as I wondered when I had taught him that this was all I was worth. The Children's Foundation Benefit Gala had run later than expected. I gripped the steering wheel tightly as snow swirled in front of my headlights, reducing visibility to mere feet. Route 125 was treacherous in winter weather, but I'd made this drive countless times over the decades. Just 10 more miles, I murmured to myself, leaning forward as if those extra inches would help me see through the blizzard. My phone rang, the sound startling in the silent car. I glanced at the screen mounted on my dashboard. Jennifer. I pressed the hands-free button. Martha, are you driving in this storm? She sounded concerned. Almost home, I assured her, touched by her worry. Is everything all right? Actually, Richard wanted me to ask if we could use your antique serving platter for our dinner party next week. The silver one with the grape design? The disappointment was so familiar, I barely felt it anymore. Of course, I can drop it off. No need! We'll send a courier. Too dangerous for you to drive in winter, especially at your age. My age, as if 63 made me decrepit. I'll leave it on the porch tomorrow, I said, distracted by a pair of headlights veering into my lane, then back. Perfect. Oh, and Richard wants to know if... I never heard the rest of her question. A pickup truck appeared suddenly through the curtain of snow, skidding sideways across the center line. I yanked the wheel to avoid collision, felt the horrifying sensation of tires losing traction, and then the world spun. There was a deafening crash as my car hit the guardrail, metal screaming against metal. Pain exploded in my head. Warm wetness trickled down my face. The airbag dust made breathing difficult. My last conscious thought was of the framed photo of Emma and Lucas on my dashboard, now shattered and flecked with my blood. Then darkness. I awoke to the steady beep of machines and the antiseptic smell of hospital. A nurse with kind eyes noticed me stirring. Welcome back, Mrs. Sullivan. You've been unconscious for 5 days. My throat felt like sandpaper. My son? I managed to croak. Something flickered across her face. Pity, perhaps. We've been in contact with your emergency contact, Richard Sullivan. He's been informed of your condition. He's not here? The words felt like glass in my throat. I'm afraid not. Would you like me to call him now that you're awake? I closed my eyes, unable to bear the nurse's compassionate gaze. The pain in my head was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. Mrs. Sullivan, you've suffered a traumatic brain injury. The doctors induced a coma to reduce swelling. You're stable now, but recovery will take time. I nodded slightly, wincing at the pain the movement caused. "Should I call your son?" she asked again gently. "No," I whispered. "He's busy." Later that afternoon, Jennifer arrived, flustered and carrying flowers. Her eyes widened at the sight of me, bandaged, bruised, connected to tubes and monitors. "Oh, Martha, we had no idea it was this serious." She rushed to my bedside, taking my hand carefully between hers. "Where's Richard?" My voice was stronger now, though each word still hurt. Jennifer looked away. "He's in Vermont. The Morrison deal, you know." But I saw the truth in her averted eyes. The Morrison deal was a lie. "When will he come?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Jennifer's silence told me everything. My son, my only child, had decided not to come. The realization settled into my bones, colder than the snow that had caused my crash. I had almost died alone, and even that wasn't enough to bring my son to my side. "Can you squeeze my fingers, Mrs. Sullivan?" Dr. Chen asked, her face serious as she conducted my neurological exam 2 weeks after the accident. I complied, watching her expression carefully. "Good. Any headaches today? Dizziness? Nausea?" "Less than yesterday," I admitted. "When can I go home?" Dr. Chen sat on the edge of my bed. "Soon, but not alone. You'll need assistance for at least a few weeks. Do you have someone who can stay with you?" Richard's absence hung in the room like an uninvited guest. Jennifer had visited twice more, bringing handmade cards from Emma and Lucas that now decorated my hospital tray. But my son remained in Boston, too busy to make the 40-minute drive. "I'll figure something out," I said, looking away. After Dr. Chen left, I reached for my phone with trembling fingers. I'd been avoiding this call, clinging to the hope that Richard would appear without prompting. I dialed his office number. "Sullivan Consulting. This is Amber speaking." "Hello, Amber. This is Martha Sullivan, Richard's mother." Her voice immediately softened. "Mrs. Sullivan, how are you feeling? We've all been so worried." Had they? Had Richard shared my condition with his staff while failing to visit himself? "I'm being discharged tomorrow," I said. "Could you put Richard on the line? I need to discuss arrangements." "Oh, he's in meetings all day. Client presentations. Can I have him call you back?" Another deflection. Another wall between us. "No need," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Just tell him I'll be home tomorrow afternoon." After hanging up, I called Eleanor. "Martha, thank God. I've been trying to visit, but they said family only in the ICU." The warmth in her voice brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Eleanor, I hate to ask, but—" "I'm already packing an overnight bag," she interrupted. "Just tell me what time to pick you up." That simple act of friendship broke something inside me. I clutched the phone, sobbing silently while Eleanor waited patiently on the line. 1 o'clock, I finally managed. "And Eleanor? Thank you. Don't you dare thank me. That's what friends are for." The next morning, as the nurse helped me dress, Jennifer arrived unexpectedly. "I thought you might need these," she said, placing a bag of comfortable clothes on the bed. "And I brought your favorite scarf." I studied her face, the guilt in her eyes, the tight set of her mouth. Richard couldn't come. Jennifer sat beside me, taking my hand. "Martha, there's something you should know." She took a deep breath. "Richard wasn't at any Morrison deal when you had your accident. He was at a ski resort in Vermont with colleagues." The truth hit me like a physical blow. "A ski trip while I was in a coma? I told him to come. I begged him." Tears filled her eyes. "He said the doctors assured him you'd recover, that there was nothing he could do here." "Nothing he could do," I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. "Except be here? Except show up?" Jennifer looked down. "I'm so sorry, Martha. I've watched this pattern for years, how he takes you for granted. I just couldn't stay silent anymore." A knock at the door interrupted us. Eleanor entered, her face brightening at the sight of me dressed and sitting up. "Ready to go home, Rumi?" she asked cheerfully. Jennifer looked between us, confused. "Eleanor's staying with me for a while," I explained, meeting her eyes directly. I didn't want to burden the family. The flash of shame on Jennifer's face confirmed what I already knew. Richard hadn't offered, hadn't even considered it. As Eleanor wheeled me toward the exit, Jennifer hurried alongside. "I'll visit tomorrow with the kids. They've missed you terribly." "I'd like that," I said sincerely. The children, at least, were innocent. In Eleanor's car, I watched the hospital recede in the side mirror. For 20 years after George died, I'd structured my life around Richard's needs. His schedule, his convenience. I'd been at every graduation, every award ceremony, every milestone, and when I needed him most, he went skiing. "You're awfully quiet," Eleanor observed as we turned onto my street. "I'm just thinking," I replied, watching familiar landmarks pass by. "About what happens next?" Eleanor glanced at me. "And what does happen next, Martha?" I touched the scar forming at my temple. "I'm not entirely sure, but I know it's going to be different." The first week home was a brutal lesson in vulnerability. Simple tasks became mountains to climb, showering without falling, preparing meals when I couldn't stand for long, remembering to take my medications through the fog of pain and fatigue. Eleanor was my salvation, sleeping in the guest room and driving me to follow up appointments, but I saw the toll it was taking on her. She had her own life, her own responsibilities. "I can hire a home health aide," I suggested one evening as she brought me tea and medication. "Nonsense," she replied, though I could see the dark circles under her eyes. "I'm happy to help." "Eleanor, you've done more than enough. Richard should be—" I stopped myself, the familiar ache returning. She sat beside me. "Have you heard from him?" "He texted yesterday, asked if I needed anything." I didn't mention that the text had ended with a reminder about returning the keys to the beach apartment. Apparently, Jennifer's parents had enjoyed their stay and wanted to use it again. "And what did you tell him?" "That I was fine." The lie had come easily, typed with shaking hands while I struggled to manage the 4 steps from my bedroom to the bathroom. Eleanor frowned. "Martha!" The doorbell interrupted us. Eleanor went to answer, returning moments later with wide eyes. "It's Richard!" My heart leaped despite everything. I smoothed my hair, wishing I'd changed out of my robe. Richard entered, carrying a small bouquet and a leather portfolio. He looked immaculate in his tailored suit, not a hair out of place. The contrast between his polished appearance and my fragile state felt suddenly humiliating. "Mom," he bent to kiss my cheek, his cologne overwhelming. "You look good, better than I expected." Before I could respond, he turned to Eleanor. "Thanks for helping out. I can take it from here." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Are you staying the night?" "What?" "No, I have meetings tomorrow, but I can visit for a while." After Eleanor retreated to the kitchen, Richard sat across from me. "How are you feeling? The doctors said you're doing well." "I'm managing," I said, watching him place the portfolio on the coffee table. "What's that?" "Actually, that's why I came." He leaned forward, suddenly animated. "The accident got me thinking. We need a better plan for emergencies." I waited, hoping against hope that what followed would be concern for my well-being, an offer of support, perhaps even an apology for his absence. Instead, Richard opened the portfolio, revealing legal documents. "I've had some papers drawn up. Essentially, they'd transfer your assets into my name, the house, the beach property, your investments. That way, if anything happens, I can manage everything seamlessly." I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. "It's the practical solution," he continued, misreading my silence as consideration. "No probate delays, no complications. I'd have immediate access to your accounts to handle any medical bills or decisions." "Medical decisions," I repeated. "Like whether to visit your mother in the hospital?" Richard's expression flickered. "That's not fair. I was in the middle of a ski trip," I finished. "Jennifer told me." He sat back, color rising in his cheeks. "She had no right. She had every right. She's more concerned about me than my own son." Richard's jaw tightened. "Look, I'm trying to help. These papers protect both of us." "Both of us? Or just you?" I gestured to the documents. "You want control of everything I own, everything your father and I worked for. What exactly would I get in return?" "Mom, be reasonable. You're not thinking clearly. The head injury has made me see more clearly than I have in years." I pushed the portfolio back toward him with trembling hands. "I need time to think about this, and I'd like to have my own lawyer review the documents." Richard's surprise was almost comical. In all our years, I had never denied him anything. "Your lawyer? Mom, this is straightforward. My friend Jake drew these up as a favor. Then it won't hurt to have Stuart look them over." Stuart Goldstein had been George's attorney and friend for decades. "I'll let you know my decision." Richard stood, frustration evident in every line of his body. "Fine. Take your time. I'm just trying to do what's best for everyone." As he gathered the papers, his phone chimed. He checked it, then glanced at his watch. "I need to go. Early meeting tomorrow." No offer to help with dinner. No questions about my recovery plan. Just another exit. Another priority more important than me. At the door, he paused. Think about it, Mom. It really is the sensible thing to do. After he left, Eleanor emerged from the kitchen. I heard enough to get the gist. The nerve of that boy. I sat silent, processing the interaction. For the first time, I'd seen my son clearly. Not as the child I'd raised or the man I'd idealized, but as he truly was. Are you okay? Eleanor asked, concern etching her features. No, I admitted, but I think I might be, eventually. That night, I dreamed of George. In the dream, he took my hand and asked, "What would you do if you were truly free?" I woke with tears on my cheeks and the first inkling of an answer forming in my mind. Martha, what would you do if you knew you had only 5 years left to live? Stuart Goldstein's question hung in the air of his wood-paneled office. Outside, spring had arrived in Haverhill, cherry blossoms dotting the trees along the courthouse square. That's an odd question to ask someone who nearly died 3 months ago, I replied, attempting a smile. Stuart leaned back in his chair, his bow tie slightly askew as always. He'd been George's closest friend for 40 years and had watched Richard grow from a toddler to the man he was today. It's exactly the right question. You've brought me these papers. He tapped the portfolio Richard had given me. But before we discuss them, I want to know what you want, Martha. I stared out the window, considering. What did I want? For so long, my wants had been secondary to Richard's needs, to maintaining peace, to being the ever-available mother and grandmother. The words came slowly at first, then in a rush. I want to see the Tuscan countryside. I want to wake up without wondering if today is the day Richard might call. I want to matter for who I am, not what I provide. Stuart nodded, satisfaction in his eyes. Now we're getting somewhere. He spent the next hour dismantling Richard's proposal piece by piece, explaining the implications of what my son had asked. This arrangement would leave you completely dependent on Richard's goodwill to access your own money, Stuart explained. There are far better ways to handle emergency planning. Healthcare proxies, limited powers of attorney, living wills. Richard said this was simpler. Simpler for him, perhaps. Stuart's voice gentled. Martha, I've known that boy his entire life. I loved watching him grow up. But this proposal isn't about protecting you. It's about controlling assets. The truth hurt. But I couldn't deny it anymore. What should I do? First, we're going to tear these up. He suited action to words, ripping Richard's documents in half. Then, we're going to draft proper documents that protect your interests while still providing for sensible emergency measures. Stuart pulled out a yellow legal pad. Now, let's talk about your will. By the time I left Stuart's office, I had a plan. Not just legal documents, but the first outline of a new life. Richard would receive 30% of my estate, enough to honor our relationship without rewarding his neglect. The remaining 70% would go to the Children's Foundation that had given my retirement years meaning and purpose. More importantly, I had appointments with a financial planner and a travel agent for the following week. That evening, I received a text from Richard. Any update on the papers? I replied simply, still reviewing with Stuart. We'll be in touch soon. Then I did something I'd never done before. I enrolled in online Italian lessons. That night, I practiced saying buongiorno until Eleanor threatened to move back to her own house if I didn't let her sleep. The next morning, I met with Kevin, the physical therapist Dr. Chen had recommended. Unlike the hospital therapists who had treated me gently, Kevin pushed me to my limits and beyond. You've got more strength than you realize, he said, as I completed a set of exercises that left me breathless. Most people your age who've had your injuries would still be using a walker. I'm not most people, I replied, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. Kevin grinned. No, you're not. Same time Thursday? As the weeks passed, my body grew stronger. The headaches became less frequent, my balance more reliable. Eleanor returned to her own home, though she still drove me to appointments and joined me for our weekly breakfast. Richard called occasionally, each conversation circling back to the papers and when I'd sign them. Each time I deflected, mentioning instead my progress in physical therapy or asking about the children. One afternoon, I ventured into the garage where George's restored Mustang sat covered, untouched, since Richard had last borrowed it for a client event 6 months before the accident. I pulled back the cover, running my fingers over the gleaming cherry red paint. I'm selling you too, I whispered to the car. Someone should enjoy you properly. The vintage Mustang would fetch a good price. Not that I needed the money, but because it symbolized another thing I'd preserved for Richard that he only valued as a status symbol. George had loved this car, spending weekends restoring it. Richard merely used it to impress others. The day Kevin declared I was ready to drive again marked a turning point. Freedom returned in the form of my car keys and the open road. My first solo trip was to the beach apartment in Cape Cod, not to prepare it for Richard's use, but to assess it with new eyes. Standing on the deck overlooking the Atlantic, I remembered summers with George, his laugh as he taught Richard to swim in those same waves. Good memories, untainted by present disappointments. My phone rang. Richard. Mom, I need to book the beach house for July 4th weekend. Client entertainment. For the first time in memory, I didn't automatically agree. I'm sorry, Richard, but I'll be using it myself that weekend. I'm having a reunion with my college roommates. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, he spoke, confusion evident. You're using it yourself. Since when do you have college reunions? Since I decided to reconnect with old friends, I replied, watching seagulls wheel above the waves. I'm sure you can find another venue for your clients. After we hung up, I stood straighter, the ocean breeze catching my hair. The reunion was a spontaneous idea, but suddenly it felt perfect. I spent the drive home making mental lists of women I hadn't seen in decades, wondering what they had made of their lives, while I had made mine all about Richard. It was time to find out. You look like a different woman, Eleanor declared as I modeled my new outfit, tailored linen pants and a silk blouse in a shade of blue I'd never have chosen 6 months ago. I feel like one, I admitted, turning to see my reflection. The woman in the mirror had a straight spine and clear eyes. My hair, once colored to hide the gray in a futile attempt to look not old for Richard's colleagues, now sported a stylish silver bob that framed my face. 6 months after the accident, I hardly recognized myself, not just physically, but internally. The timid woman who measured her worth by her son's approval was fading, replaced by someone who woke each morning wondering what she wanted to accomplish that day. The college reunion weekend at the beach house had been transformative. Reconnecting with women I'd known in my 20s, women who had built careers, traveled the world, survived loss, and celebrated triumphs, showed me paths not taken, but still possible. Caroline, once my shy roommate, was now a retired judge. Diane had left an abusive marriage at 50 and started her own business at 52. Each story strengthened my resolve to write a new chapter in my own life. My phone chimed with a text from Richard. Need beach house Memorial Day weekend. Important clients. Okay? Once, I would have immediately agreed. Now, I took my time responding, sorry, not available, having work done on the property. Another lie, but one that preserved my newfound boundaries. The truth, that I was considering selling the beach house, wasn't something I was ready to share. My financial advisor had been clear. The Cape Cod property had appreciated significantly. Selling it would fund my travel dreams while leaving my retirement investments untouched. It was the practical choice, but I knew Richard would see it as a betrayal. That afternoon, I consulted with my neurologist, Dr. Patel, for my 6-month follow-up. Your recovery has been remarkable, Mrs. Sullivan, he said, reviewing my scans. But I want to be clear, traumatic brain injuries require ongoing monitoring. If you're serious about extended travel, you'll need to establish care with a neurologist wherever you go. I'm planning on Italy, I said. Florence, specifically. Excellent medical care there, he nodded. I can refer you to a colleague, but there are practical considerations. Your insurance may not cover international treatment, and visas can be complicated for longer stays. I'd already begun researching these issues. Tourist visas would only allow 90 days in Italy within a 180-day period. For longer stays, I'd need to navigate the complicated Italian bureaucracy for an elective residency visa, which required proof of financial self-sufficiency, housing arrangements, and health insurance. I've been looking into private international health insurance, I told him, and I'm working with an immigration attorney who specializes in helping Americans relocate to Italy. Dr. Patel seemed impressed by my thoroughness. Just ensure I receive all records from your Italian doctors. And remember, no extended travel without medical clearance. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I opened it to find Jennifer and the children, their unexpected visit a pleasant surprise. Grandma! Emma rushed forward, stopping short when she saw me. You look different. Good different or bad different, I asked. kneeling despite the protest in my knees. Pretty different, she decided, hugging me tightly. Lucas hung back, suddenly shy. At 8, he was at that age where affection came less easily. I didn't push, instead inviting them in for the cookies I always kept in the freezer for such occasions. While the children explored the backyard, Jennifer helped me prepare tea. "Richard mentioned you're redecorating," she said, glancing around the kitchen where new curtains and paint had transformed the once dated space. "Just a few changes. I didn't mention that I'd finally replaced the 30-year-old cabinets George and I had planned to update before his diagnosis changed everything." Jennifer hesitated, then spoke carefully. "He's upset about the beach house, says you keep refusing to let him use it." I met her gaze directly. "It's my property, Jennifer. I'm allowed to use it myself." "Of course you are." She lowered her voice, though the children were outside. "Martha, I want you to know I supported your decision not to sign those papers. Richard and I disagreed about it. The revelation surprised me." "You knew about those documents?" Jennifer looked away. "He presented it as estate planning, but it felt wrong, especially after—" She trailed off. "After he couldn't be bothered to visit me in the hospital," I finished for her. "Yes," she placed her hand over mine. "I should have done more, said more. You came," I reminded her. That mattered. Later, as they prepared to leave, Lucas finally approached me. "Dad says you're acting weird lately," he announced with a child's brutal honesty. "Does he?" I smiled, unruffled. "What do you think?" Lucas studied me seriously. "I think you look happier, like my teacher when she came back from summer vacation." Out of the mouths of babes. After they left, I called Stuart. "I've made a decision about the beach house. I want to sell it." "Are you sure? Richard won't take it well." "I'm sure." My voice was steady. "It's time to use that asset for my benefit, not just as a convenient perk for Richard's business." That evening, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, watching fireflies emerge in the summer twilight. The physical therapist had described my recovery as remarkable. My neurologist had cleared me for travel, with conditions. My Italian lessons had progressed to simple conversations. For the first time in decades, I was living for myself, making choices based on my desires rather than others' expectations. The sensation was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The restaurant I chose for our meeting was upscale, but quiet, a place where Richard would feel comfortable in his designer suit, but where we could talk without interruption. I arrived early, selecting a corner table that offered privacy. When Richard entered, he scanned the room with the confident air of a man accustomed to commanding attention. When his eyes found me, a flash of surprise crossed his face. Perhaps he'd expected the same mother he'd always known, eager to please, quick to accommodate. Instead, he found a stranger, hair-styled, wearing a tailored dress and subtle makeup, sitting straight-backed with a martini rather than my usual white wine. "Mom," he kissed my cheek before sitting. "You look different." "Thank you." I smiled, letting the awkward silence stretch until he filled it. "So what's this about? Your cryptic phone call has had me worried." The waiter arrived, and Richard ordered scotch, neat. Once we were alone again, I leaned forward. "I'm selling the beach house," I said without preamble. His face froze. "What? Why would you do that?" "Dad loved that place. We have family memories there." "Yes, we do, but I haven't used it properly in years. It's become your business entertainment venue, not my vacation home." Richard's expression hardened. "Is this some kind of punishment? Because I didn't visit you in the hospital?" "No. Richard, this is about me making decisions for my own benefit, not yours." I sipped my drink. "The proceeds from the sale will fund my plans." "What plans?" Suspicion colored his voice. "I'm going to Italy. Initially for 3 months, the maximum I can stay on a tourist visa. I've always wanted to see Tuscany, to learn Italian cooking, to experience life beyond Haverhill." Richard stared as if I'd announced plans to fly to the moon. "Italy? Mom, that's crazy. What about your doctor appointments? Your volunteer work? What about the kids?" "My doctors have cleared me for travel, with arrangements for care in Italy. The foundation understands my sabbatical, and the children can video chat with me." I held his gaze. "Richard, I'm 63, not 93. I'm in good health, I have the financial means, and I have dreams I've postponed long enough." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "And you need to sell our family beach house for this midlife crisis trip?" "The beach house is mine, not ours, and this isn't a crisis. It's a choice." I placed my hand over his. Richard, I need you to understand something. Since your father died, I've structured my entire life around your needs and preferences. I've been available whenever you wanted, invisible when you didn't. I gave you financial support, emotional support, practical support, without complaint, without conditions, because that's what mothers do, he interrupted. No, that's what I did, to my own detriment. And when I nearly died, you couldn't even pause your ski vacation to sit by my hospital bed. The direct accusation landed like a physical blow. Richard flinched, then rallied. That's not fair. The doctors said you would recover. There was nothing I could do. You could have been there, I said simply. That's all I needed. My son, showing up when it mattered most. Our entrees arrived, providing a momentary reprieve from the tension. We ate in silence for several minutes before Richard spoke again. So this is all because I didn't visit you in the hospital? You're punishing me by selling the beach house and running off to Italy? I set down my fork. This isn't about punishment, Richard. It's about me finally recognizing my own worth. The accident showed me how fragile life is, how quickly everything can change. I don't want to spend my remaining years waiting for crumbs of your attention. That's not fair, he repeated, but with less conviction. Let me ask you something. I leaned forward. How many of my birthdays have you remembered in the last decade? How many times have you called just to ask how I'm doing, without needing something? His silence was answer enough. I'm not angry anymore, I continued gently, but I am done living my life in your shadow. I'm selling the beach house, I'm traveling to Italy, and I've revised my will to reflect my values. At this, his head snapped up. Your will? What does that mean? It means I'm leaving 30% of my estate to you, which is generous considering our relationship. The rest goes to the Children's Foundation. The color drained from his face. 30%? Mom, that's not right. Dad would never have wanted that. Your father would have expected his son to be present when his wife was in a coma. My voice remained calm, despite the storm in my heart. The foundation gives meaning to my life. Those children appreciate my presence, my contributions. They see me. Richard pushed his plate away, appetite gone. I see you. No, Richard. You see what I can provide. There's a difference. I also told him about selling George's Mustang. I've already found a buyer, a collector who will appreciate it the way your father did. This second blow seemed to hit him harder than the beach house. The Mustang? But that was Dad's pride and joy. He always said it would be mine someday. And it could have been, if you'd shown any real interest in it beyond impressing clients. Your father restored that car with love. You used it as a status symbol. As we parted outside the restaurant, Richard's expression was troubled. This isn't over, Mom. You're not thinking clearly. I straightened my shoulders. On the contrary, for the first time in years, I'm seeing with perfect clarity. Watching him walk away, I felt neither triumph nor regret, only the quiet certainty that comes with finally speaking one's truth. The realtor's sign appeared in front of the Cape Cod property on a Tuesday. By Friday, I had 3 offers above asking price. The hot summer market and oceanfront location made the beach house a coveted property, despite Richard's last-minute attempts to dissuade me. At least wait until next year, he had pleaded during a tense phone call. Give yourself time to really think this through. But my mind was made up. The sale closed quickly. The proceeds transferred to a new account earmarked for what I had come to call my Renaissance Fund. In my kitchen, Eleanor watched as I sorted through decades of accumulated possessions, deciding what to keep, what to store, and what to release. I never thought you'd actually do it, she admitted, helping me pack Christmas ornaments into preservation boxes. Sell the beach house, I mean. Neither did I. I carefully wrapped a hand-blown glass ornament George had given me on our first Christmas together. But once I made the decision, it felt right, like setting down a heavy suitcase I'd been carrying for years. And the Mustang? Picked up yesterday. The new owner actually cried when he started the engine, said he'd been looking for that exact model and year for a decade. And Richard, I sighed. He's still processing. Jennifer says he alternates between anger and disbelief. And the Italy plans? Getting more complicated by the day. I showed her the stack of paperwork on my kitchen table, visa applications, international health insurance forms, housing inquiries, Italian tax implications. Turns out moving to another country, even temporarily, isn't as simple as buying a plane ticket. The immigration attorney I'd hired had explained the realities. I could stay for 90 days as a tourist, but would then need to leave the Schengen area for 90 days before returning. For longer-term stays, I'd need an elective residency visa, which required extensive documentation proving financial self-sufficiency, appropriate housing, comprehensive health insurance, and a clean criminal record. What if you don't like it there? Eleanor asked, practical as always. Then I come home and figure out what's next. That's the beauty of it. I'm not burning bridges, just building new ones. My phone rang. Richard. These calls had become predictable in their pattern. Initial pleasantries, followed by increasingly desperate attempts to change my mind about both the beach house and my travel plans. Hello? Richard. Mom. His voice sounded different, less confrontational, more subdued. Can we talk? In person? We arranged to meet at my house the following evening. After I hung up, Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Another attempt to change your mind? Probably. I closed the box of Christmas memories, but this time, I'm ready. The next evening, Richard arrived punctually, looking uncharacteristically casual in jeans and a polo shirt. He carried a bottle of my favorite wine and a photo album I recognized from his childhood home. Peace offering, he said, handing me the wine. We settled in the living room, the photo album between us on the coffee table. I've been thinking about what you said, Richard began, uncharacteristically hesitant. About me not seeing you, about taking you for granted. I waited, giving him space to continue. I found this album when I was looking for some old tax documents in my office. He opened it to reveal photographs I hadn't seen in years. Richard's childhood, family vacations, school events. You were at everything, every game, every ceremony, every milestone. Of course I was. The memories flooded back, the pride I'd felt watching him grow, achieve, become. After Dad died, you never missed a beat. You were grieving, but you still showed up for me. He turned the page to a photo of his college graduation. I guess I got used to it. To you always being there, no matter what. That's what I wanted you to understand, Richard. I chose to be there for everything. I structured my life around you. But when I needed you, you chose skiing. He flinched, but didn't argue. I know. Jennifer hasn't let me forget it. He closed the album. I'm not here to ask you to change your mind about the beach house or Italy. I realize those ships have sailed. Then why are you here? To ask what happens when you come back. Will you sell this house too? Move away permanently? The vulnerability in his voice reminded me of the little boy who'd once feared I'd disappear when I dropped him at kindergarten. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. This trip is about discovering what I want for this chapter of my life. I might come back and settle right back into this house. I might decide to try for a more permanent arrangement in Italy, though the visa process is daunting. I'm leaving my options open. Richard nodded slowly. Jennifer thinks this is good for you. The kids are excited about having a grandmother who travels, at least temporarily. They're already planning their visit. The concession surprised me. They'd be welcome. All of you would. He reached for his wine glass. I didn't come to change your mind. I came to understand. And I think I'm starting to. After he left, I stood in my doorway, watching his car disappear down the street. The conversation hadn't been the confrontation I'd expected, but neither had it been a full reconciliation. It was something more nuanced, the first tentative steps toward a more honest relationship. Inside, I returned to my packing, now with a lighter heart. 2 weeks remained before my departure, and much remained to be done. But as I sorted through the physical artifacts of my life, deciding what deserved space in my future, I felt a growing certainty that I was on the right path. That night, I dreamed of Tuscan hillsides and woke with a smile on my face, ready for whatever came next. Florence embraced me with September sunshine and the scent of espresso. My rented apartment near the Ponte Vecchio was small but perfect, a second-floor walk-up with a tiny balcony overlooking a courtyard where neighborhood children played in the late afternoons. The reality of living in a foreign country proved both more challenging and more rewarding than I had anticipated. Simple tasks became adventures, figuring out how to pay bills, deciphering Italian washing machine instructions, navigating the Byzantine bureaucracy of Italian residency requirements. I'd arrived on a 90-day tourist visa, but my immigration attorney was helping me prepare an application for an elective residency visa. The process was complicated, requiring proof of financial resources, a rental contract, comprehensive health insurance, and letters explaining why I wanted to stay in Italy. I'd also had to register with the local health authority and find an English-speaking neurologist recommended by Dr. Patel to continue monitoring my recovery. After the initial disorientation of being alone in a foreign country, I found my rhythm. Mornings began with coffee at the cafe downstairs, where the owner, Marco, patiently corrected my Italian pronunciation. Afternoons were spent exploring museums or taking cooking classes. Evenings often found me in the company of other expatriates, mostly retirees like myself, discovering the world in our bonus years. I'd been in Italy for 6 weeks when Richard finally made a video call that wasn't rushed or filled with barely concealed disapproval. "The apartment looks good," he commented, noting the sunlit walls behind me. "How's the food?" "Better than I could have imagined." I tilted the camera to show the view from my balcony. "And the people have been wonderful." "The kids miss you," he said, an olive branch extended across the Atlantic. "Lucas has a science project about Italy now. His teacher's impressed with his inside information." I smiled, thinking of our weekly calls where I shared historical facts and cultural observations with my grandchildren. "And how are things with you?" A slight hesitation. "Different. The beach house sold again. The new owners tore it down to build something modern." I waited for the accusation. The guilt trip about family memories destroyed. It didn't come. "Probably for the best," Richard said instead, surprising me. "It needed a lot of work." After the call ended, I sat on my balcony, processing the subtle shift in our interaction. Not reconciliation, exactly, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance. As my 90-day visa limit approached, I faced my first major hurdle. My residency application was still pending. Italian bureaucracy moved at its own pace, which meant I needed to leave the Schengen area for 90 days before I could return. I'd prepared for this possibility, arranging a 3-month rental in London where I could continue my Italian studies while waiting for the visa situation to resolve. Eleanor visited me in London during this period, her practicality a welcome counterpoint to my newfound spontaneity. "You've changed," she observed over dinner at a small pub near my temporary flat. "It's not just the Italian clothes or the confidence. You move differently, speak differently." "I feel different," I admitted. "For the first time in decades, I'm making choices based solely on what I want, not what others expect." "And what do you want now?" Eleanor asked. "Will you come home?" Home. The word had shifted meaning over the past months. Haverhill was still home in many ways, familiar streets, memories, connections. But Florence had claimed a piece of my heart as well. "I don't know yet," I answered truthfully, "but I'm not rushing the decision." My elective residency visa was finally approved in January, allowing me to return to Florence. I found a new apartment in a different neighborhood, a 1-year lease that would give me time to decide whether Italy would be my permanent home or just a chapter in my ongoing story. In February, I received an unexpected email from Jennifer. The kids and I would like to visit during their spring break in April. Richard says he might join for the second week, work permitting. Would that be okay? The prospect of sharing my new world with my family filled me with both excitement and trepidation. I spent weeks preparing, researching child-friendly excursions, practicing special Italian dishes in my cooking class, learning the public transportation routes that would best accommodate visitors. April arrived with showers that turned the Tuscan countryside an impossible green. I waited at the airport, heart pounding as passengers streamed through the arrival gate. Then suddenly, there they were, Emma taller than I remembered, Lucas wearing glasses that made him look studious, Jennifer waving frantically when she spotted me. The children rushed forward, wrapping me in hugs that smelled of airplane pretzels and excitement. Jennifer followed more slowly, her eyes taking in my appearance, the stylish Italian haircut, the confident posture, the colorful scarf tied with European flair. "Martha," she breathed, "you look amazing." Those first days were a whirlwind of sightseeing and gelato, the children's enthusiasm infectious as they discovered the wonders of Florence through fresh eyes. Jennifer and I found new common ground, our relationship deepening without Richard's presence as a buffer or focus. "He might not come," Jennifer confided one evening after the children were asleep. "He's nervous about seeing you, about how much you've changed." "I'm still his mother," I said. "That hasn't changed, even if everything else has." But as the week progressed, Richard's texts became more frequent, his questions about our activities more engaged. The morning he was scheduled to arrive, I found myself watching the door with the same anticipation I'd once reserved for his childhood homecomings. When he finally appeared, suitcase in hand, the moment stretched between us, recognition and uncertainty, the past and present colliding in the sunlit Italian apartment that represented my independence. Mom! He stepped forward, embracing me awkwardly. You look happy. It was the most accurate observation he could have made. I am happy, I replied, realizing the truth of it deep in my bones. Come in. Your children have 1,000 things to show you. Are you absolutely certain about this? Stuart's voice crackled over the video call, concern evident despite the poor connection. Behind him, I could see the familiar wood paneling of his Haverhill office, a world away from my sun-drenched Florentine apartment. Completely certain, I replied, holding up the signed documents for him to see. It's the right decision for this chapter of my life. I had decided to sell my Haverhill house, not impulsively, but after 14 months of living primarily in Italy with summer visits back to Massachusetts. The practicality was undeniable. Maintaining an empty house made little financial sense, and the emotional attachments I'd feared losing had proven portable, residing in memories rather than walls and floors. Richard won't be pleased, Stuart warned. Richard knows it's coming. We've discussed it during his visits. 2 visits now. The April trip to Florence, followed by a week in August, when he'd brought the family to stay at my rental cottage on Cape Cod, a smaller, more manageable property than the beach house I'd sold. Our relationship remained complex, moments of genuine connection interspersed with old patterns that died hard. But we were learning a new way to be mother and son, one based on mutual respect rather than one-sided accommodation. Living in Italy had proven more complicated than I'd initially imagined. The residency permit I'd obtained required annual renewal, with mountains of paperwork each time. Banking was a challenge. American tax reporting requirements made some Italian banks reluctant to take U.S. clients. Healthcare involved a complex mix of Italian public services and private insurance to ensure coverage for my ongoing neurological monitoring. But the rewards outweighed the challenges. At 65, I had found an unexpected new beginning, teaching English part-time at a local language school with a proper work permit obtained through the school's sponsorship, volunteering with a cultural preservation society, making friends who knew me only as Martha, not as Richard's mother or George's widow. My neurologist in Florence, Dr. Bianchi, had been monitoring my recovery closely. The brain continues to heal even years after injury, he'd explained during my last checkup. But you must remain vigilant about symptoms, headaches, dizziness, memory issues. I'd been diligent with my follow-ups, grateful that my international health insurance covered these specialized consultations. The consistent care had allowed me to fully embrace my new life without fear. My phone chimed with a message from Richard. Got time to talk? Important news. We connected an hour later, his face serious on my tablet screen. Mom, Jennifer and I are getting divorced. The announcement shouldn't have shocked me. I'd sensed tension during their visit, noticed the careful distance they maintained. Still, hearing it stated plainly sent a wave of sadness through me. I'm so sorry, Richard. What happened? He ran a hand through his hair, now showing strands of gray at the temples. Nothing dramatic. We've been growing apart for years. Jennifer says I'm too focused on work, too controlling. A bitter laugh. Apparently, I learned that from watching how I treated you. The admission hung between us, raw and honest. The kids? I asked. Joint custody, though they'll live primarily with Jennifer. She's keeping the house. I nodded, thinking of Emma and Lucas, now 12 and 10, facing this fundamental shift in their world. I've rented an apartment near them, Richard continued, and I'm cutting back my hours at work. Jennifer was right about that part. At least, I've been absent too much. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. His recognition of his absence in his children's lives mirroring my own realizations about his absence in mine. You'll find your way, I said finally. It won't be easy, but you'll create a new relationship with them. Like we've done? A question laden with history. Yes, different, but potentially better in some ways, more honest. After we disconnected, I sat with the news, feeling its ripples across the Atlantic. My first instinct, to pack immediately, to rush back and help manage the crisis, rose and subsided like a wave. Richard hadn't asked for that. He was informing me, adult to adult, not seeking rescue. Instead, I sent separate messages to Emma and Lucas, reminding them of my love, offering to talk whenever they wanted. Then I messaged Jennifer, a simple acknowledgement of the difficult time and an offer of friendship independent of her relationship with Richard. That evening, as I walked to my favorite neighborhood restaurant for dinner, I realized how much had changed. 2 years ago, I would have dropped everything to solve Richard's problems, to smooth his path regardless of the cost to myself. Now, I recognized both his ability to handle his own life and my right to continue living mine. At the restaurant, I joined a table of regulars, an American painter, an Australian widow, a British retired professor, and several Italians who patiently corrected our grammar between courses. We spoke of art exhibitions and local politics, shared photographs of grandchildren, debated the best gelato in Florence. These people knew nothing of the Martha who had existed solely in relation to others' needs. They knew only the woman I had become, curious, engaged, occasionally stubborn, increasingly confident in her own voice. Later, alone in my apartment, I opened the email Stuart had sent containing the listing for my Haverhill house. The photographs showed rooms I had transformed before leaving, spaces remade to please myself rather than to accommodate others' expectations. I thought of Richard facing his empty apartment, learning to build a life defined by more than work and obligation. I thought of Jennifer, stepping into a new independence much as I had done. I thought of Emma and Lucas, watching the adults in their lives navigate change with varying degrees of grace. Tomorrow I would call Richard again, listen more than speak, offer support without rushing in to fix what wasn't mine to repair. I would continue planning my summer visit to Massachusetts, not to my old house now, but to a rental near the grandchildren. I would go on teaching my English classes, improving my Italian, building a life that felt authentically mine. The realization I'd had in the hospital bed 2 years ago remained true. Life was fragile, unpredictable, and far too precious to spend waiting for recognition that might never come. Better to be the author of one's own story, to write a final chapter worth reading. "Nonna, watch me," Lucas called, his voice carrying across the piazza where children kicked soccer balls in the fading summer light. At 10, he had grown lanky, his movements more confident than the shy boy who had first visited me in Florence 2 years ago. I waved from my cafe table, where Emma sat beside me, sketching the Renaissance fountain in the center of the square. At 12, she showed remarkable artistic talent, her sensitivity to light and shadow evident even in quick drawings. "He's getting good," I commented, watching Lucas successfully dribble past an older Italian boy. Emma nodded without looking up from her sketchbook. "Dad says it's because of all the practice he gets here. American kids don't play outside as much." 3 years had passed since my accident, 3 years of transformation, rebuilding, and discovery. The rhythm of my life had settled into a pattern that still sometimes amazed me. 8 months in Italy, where I maintained my residency permit through meticulous compliance with Italian bureaucracy, and 4 months in the United States, divided between summer rentals on Cape Cod and holiday visits to Richard's new home in Boston. The children spent a month with me each summer, an arrangement that had evolved as Richard and Jennifer settled into their post-divorce co-parenting routine. These weeks had become precious to all of us, a time outside normal rules and responsibilities where we explored Tuscan villages, took cooking classes, and absorbed the different pace of Italian life. Richard would arrive tomorrow for the final week, his annual vacation now aligned with the children's visit. Our relationship had found a new equilibrium, not the unquestioning devotion of my earlier years, nor the bitter awakening that followed my accident, but something more balanced. We had learned to appreciate each other as the people we actually were, rather than the roles we had once occupied. My phone chimed with a message from Eleanor, who had just returned to Massachusetts after her own 2-week visit. "Airport chaos, but made it home. Miss you already. Richard called to confirm he's bringing the papers tomorrow." The papers, not the controlling legal documents he had once tried to foist upon me, but the final transfer agreement for my foundation. After much discussion, Richard had agreed to serve on the board of the children's charity I had established with the majority of my estate. It wasn't the inheritance he had once expected, but it was a connection to my values and legacy that went deeper than mere financial gain. My life in Italy still presented challenges. Every year brought renewed paperwork for my permesso di soggiorno, residency permit. My international tax situation required specialists in both countries. Maintaining adequate health insurance coverage for my ongoing neurological care required constant vigilance. Even after 3 years, cultural misunderstandings still occasionally left me feeling like an outsider. Yet these challenges paled against the rewards. My Italian had progressed from halting phrases to confident conversation. My part-time teaching provided both structure and community. My neurologist, Dr. Bianchi, continued to marvel at my recovery, though he maintained his cautious monitoring schedule. Nonna, are you daydreaming again? Emma's voice pulled me back to the present. I asked if you think Dad will like my drawings. He'll love them, I assured her. He's proud of how your art has developed. She beamed, adding final touches to her sketch. Jennifer says I get my creativity from you. Jennifer, no longer my daughter-in-law legally, but still family in all the ways that mattered. Her post-divorce journey had paralleled my own in some ways. Returning to the career she had set aside, discovering new strengths, building an identity independent of Richard's shadow. As the sun dipped lower, Lucas joined us at the table, flushed with exertion and pride. Did you see my goal? Even Paolo said it was good, and he plays for the real team. I saw, I confirmed, pouring him water from the carafe. You've been practicing. Dad says he's thinking about an international position, Lucas said between gulps. Maybe even in Europe. I looked at him with surprise. Your father is considering working internationally? Emma nodded. His company is expanding their European operations. He's been talking to the executives about possibilities, but nothing definite yet. I absorbed this news with mixed emotions. Richard had changed significantly over the past 3 years. Our relationship had evolved into something healthier, with clearer boundaries and more honest communication. But living in the same city would be a different dynamic entirely. How would you two feel about that? I asked carefully. It would be complicated with school and Jennifer, Emma replied, with the mature perspective she often displayed. But Dad says even if it happened, it would probably be just for a year or two. He says he wants to be more adventurous, Lucas added, like you. That evening, after settling the children with their favorite Italian cartoon, I stepped onto my balcony, trying to make sense of this new development. The Florence sunset painted the city in shades of gold and rose, the familiar beauty a backdrop to my tumultuous thoughts. Richard had changed, certainly. Our relationship had improved dramatically, but was I ready to have him living nearby? Would his presence here shift the balance I'd carefully constructed? Pull me back into old patterns? When my phone rang with Richard's nightly call to the children, I passed it to them and listened to their excited chatter about the day's adventures. Later, after they'd handed me the phone, his voice was warm but neutral. The kids seemed to be having an amazing time. Thanks for making this summer special for them. They're wonderful company, I said truthfully. Lucas mentioned you're considering international positions? A pause. It's preliminary. My company is expanding in Europe, and my name came up in discussions. Nothing concrete yet. Would that be something you'd want? I kept my tone casual. Honestly, I'm not sure. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have considered it. Too disruptive, too uncertain. But seeing how you've embraced change, it's made me rethink what's possible. After we hung up, I remained on the balcony, watching lights illuminate across Florence as darkness fell. Tomorrow, Richard would arrive, and we would navigate yet another chapter in our complicated relationship. There would be missteps and old habits to overcome, but also possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. The path from that snowy night in Haverhill to this warm evening in Florence had been neither straight nor easy. The accident that had nearly taken my life had instead given me a new one, not by changing my circumstances, but by changing how I valued myself within them. I thought of the woman I had been, giving endlessly without recognition, arranging my life around others' convenience, measuring my worth by my usefulness. I barely recognized her now. In her place stood someone stronger, a woman who had learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all, that showing up for oneself is as important as showing up for others, that it's never too late to rewrite the terms of one's existence. The night air carried the scent of jasmine from the courtyard below, where an elderly Italian couple walked arm in arm, their lifelong companionship evident in their synchronized steps. I wondered what story had brought them here, what challenges they had overcome together. Every life held these turning points, moments when continuing as before becomes more painful than stepping into the unknown. My accident had been such a moment, forcing me to see clearly what I had long denied, that I deserved more than waiting by the phone, more than standing perpetually ready to give while receiving little in return. Richard's arrival tomorrow would begin another chapter, one I approached not with fear or resentment but with cautious hope. We had both learned difficult lessons about presence, value, and the true meaning of family. Now we had the chance to apply them, to build something authentic from the ruins of what had come before. Inside, I heard the children laughing at their cartoon, their voices a bridge between past and future. Whatever came next, I would face it as the woman I had become, no longer defined by what I gave to others, but by the life I had claimed for myself. In the end, that had been the truest lesson of all, that self-worth, once recognized, changes everything. And sometimes, like the beautiful Renaissance surrounding me in Florence, the most meaningful transformations come not in youth, but in the rich, complex chapters that follow. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel and don't miss the next video, with more stories that will touch your heart.